What would you do if the only person who could save your life was the same man everyone warned you to stay away from? The late afternoon sun glowed weak and tired over the New Mexico territory as Emma Wade stepped off the broken stagecoach, her boots landing on dry red dust that rose like smoke around her. Her dress was torn from the long journey. Her lips were cracked from thirst. And the moment her feet touched the ground, the driver flicked the reins and rode away, leaving her standing beside her battered trunk. He had not even looked back. Emma watched the wagon disappear into the shimmering heat. She felt a sting of fear settle in her chest. She was 24, alone, and many miles from the nearest town. She had come west for safety, not abandonment. But life had a cruel way of taking what little strength she had left and challenging her again. The land stretched silent around her, rough hills, dead trees, wind that hissed like a warning. Then she saw him. A lone horseman stood on the ridge above, still as stone, watching her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in worn leather and dust. His face was half shadowed by the wide brim of his hat, but the shape of his jaw and the hard line of his mouth showed no kindness. He looked like a man carved out of the land itself, rough, scarred, dangerous. Emma felt her heart pound. She had heard about men like him during her travel. Ranchers who lived alone for too long. Men who trusted no one. Men who were said to be more wolf than human. He nudged his horse forward. The animal snorted, kicking up dust. As he approached, Emma saw the long rifle strapped to his saddle and the deep tiredness etched into his eyes. He stopped 10 feet away. "Name?" His voice was low and rough, like gravel sliding. "Emma," she said, lifting her chin despite the shaking in her hands. "Emma Wade." "You lost?" "No," she answered, though her voice trembled, "left behind." A dry, humorless sound escaped him. Stage driver does that when he doesn't want trouble. Emma swallowed. "I'm not trouble. Everyone says that at first." Quote. He looked at her trunk, heavy, battered, its hinges straining. Then he looked back at her face, pale from heat and exhaustion. "You got water?" he asked. "No." "You got family waiting for you?" "No." "You got money?" Quote. Emma hesitated. "Not enough for another ride." The rancher's expression did not change. No pity, no surprise, nothing. Finally, he turned his horse slightly, as if ready to leave her there in the rising wind. "You'll die out here before nightfall," he said. "I won't," Emma whispered, though her voice cracked. "You will." He tapped his hat lower. "Buzzards come fast in this heat." She felt the panic rise sharp in her chest. "Sir, please. I can work, cook, clean, wash clothes. I'll earn water and shelter." He didn't answer at first. He only stared, studying her the way a man studies a storm, trying to see if it will pass or destroy everything in its path. Then he said something she did not expect. "I don't take in strays." "I'm not asking charity," Emma said quickly. "I'm offering a bargain." His head lifted slightly. "A bargain," he repeated. Emma reached into her pocket with shaking hands. She pulled out a small, folded paper, the last thing she had written before leaving her old life behind, a promise she had made to herself out of desperation and fear. She unfolded it slowly and read aloud with a trembling voice. "3 times a day I will be your wife." The rancher stiffened. For the first time since he rode near, a flicker of something, anger, confusion, disbelief, crossed his face. "What kind of fool promise is that?" he growled. "A surviving one," Emma answered softly. "I can't go back. I have no one left. I will give you every duty a wife gives a husband. Work, cooking, mending, anything you need. Just don't leave me out here." Silence fell between them, heavy and sharp. The wind pushed dust around their boots. A crow cawed somewhere on a dead branch. The rancher leaned forward slightly in his saddle, his eyes hard and unreadable. "You know who I am?" he asked. "No." "Thorne Maddox." The name hit the air like a gunshot. Emma had heard it whispered in hushed voices. A man who lost everything in one night. A man who fought off 3 men alone. A man who hadn't let another soul near his ranch in almost 4 years. She swallowed. "I don't care who you are. I just need a roof." Thorne stared at her for a long, cold moment. Then he dismounted. His boots hit the ground with a thud. He walked toward her, slow and heavy, each step meaning something. Emma's breath caught. He stopped right in front of her. "You want to be my wife 3 times a day?" he said quietly. "You have no idea what kind of man you're offering that to." Emma held her ground, though her knees shook. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. Thorne's jaw tightened. "Then you're a fool," he said. He reached down, grabbed her trunk with one hand, lifted it easily. And then he did something Emma did not expect, something that made her breath freeze in her chest. He turned, walked past her, and carried her trunk toward his ranch house. Emma stood in shock, unable to move. Thorne Maddox didn't look back when he said, "You can stay tonight, just tonight. After that, we settle what your promise really means." Quote. Emma followed him with trembling steps, not knowing that what waited inside his house would change both their lives forever. Emma had never known silence could feel so heavy. Thorne Maddox's ranch house stood alone on a rise of cracked earth and dead brush. The white paint had peeled away long ago, leaving gray wood that looked tired from fighting too many storms. The porch sagged. The windows were streaked with dirt. The house felt like it hadn't taken a real breath in years, much like the man who lived in it. Thorne dropped her trunk on the porch with a harsh thud. Emma winced at the sound, but he didn't even flinch. He walked inside without waiting for her. She followed, her heartbeat pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The inside of the house was dim, lit only by a single oil lamp on the kitchen table. Dust lay thick on every surface. The air smelled of old smoke, leather, and loneliness. Thorne stood with his back to her, his broad shoulders tense, as if regretting every step that led him to bring her here. "You can set your bag down," he said without turning. "Don't touch anything else." Emma set her small bag on the floor. Her throat felt dry. She didn't know whether she should speak or stay quiet, but the words came out anyway. "Thank you for letting me stay tonight." He turned then. The look in his eyes froze her. There was no softness in him, no welcome. Only a deep, worn exhaustion, as if he'd been carrying a mountain on his back for years. "You think this is kindness?" Thorne said, his voice low. "It's not." Emma swallowed. "I didn't say it was kindness. What did you think it was?" She hesitated. A chance. Just one. Thorne's jaw tightened. He walked closer to her, slowly, like a man approaching danger. When he stopped a foot in front of her, the heat of his body wrapped around her like a warning. "You offered yourself," he said, 3 times a day. The air seemed to thicken between them. Emma held her breath. "I offered work," she said softly. "Work a wife does." "You said more than work." "I was desperate." Thorne's eyes darkened. "Desperation makes people reckless." Emma forced herself not to look away. "So does loneliness." His breath caught for just a moment, so small she almost didn't notice, but it was there, a crack in the armor. She wondered when he had last spoken to another human being, when he had last heard a kind voice, when someone had last touched him without fear or anger. Thorne stepped back as if her closeness burned. "You'll sleep by the fire," he said, his voice rougher now. "You eat, you rest, and at first light we decide what to do about your bargain." Emma nodded, but the tension in the room didn't ease. She could feel his thoughts twisting inside him. She could feel how close he was to throwing her out, or pulling her closer. He turned away abruptly, grabbing a pot from the stove with more force than needed. He poured water into it and set it over the flames, his every movement tight and controlled. Emma watched him quietly. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms lined with scars. Some were long and jagged, others small and round like old bullet wounds. She wondered what battles he had fought and what he had lost. "Sit," he said without looking. She sat at the rough wooden table. Thorne placed a cup of water in front of her. She drank slowly, feeling the coolness slide down her dry throat. He finally sat across from her, the fire casting sharp shadows across his face. He looked at her as if trying to read every secret she carried. "What happened to you?" he asked suddenly. Emma froze. "I don't need details," he added. "But no one leaves a woman behind unless something went wrong." Emma's fingers tightened around the cup. Her vision blurred at the edges. "My husband died," she whispered. 2 months ago. His family said I was to blame." Thorne's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. A flicker of something? Recognition, maybe? "They threw me out," Emma continued. "Said I brought bad luck. Said I wasn't welcome on their land anymore." Thorne leaned back in his chair. His voice dropped lower. "And you came here?" "I didn't know where else to go." Silence settled again, thick and heavy. Thorne's hands tightened around his own cup. "You should know something," he said. "People don't live on this land unless they've already lost too much." Emma met his eyes. "Have you lost too much?" Quote. His jaw tightened. "More than enough." The fire snapped loudly, startling her. Thorne stood abruptly. "You should sleep," he said. "The storm will start soon." "Storm?" Emma looked out the window. The sky was still clear, but the wind had begun to whistle through the cracks in the wall. Thorne grabbed a blanket and tossed it toward the hearth. She lay down near the warmth of the fire, pulling her bag close. The floor was hard, but exhaustion dragged her toward sleep. As her eyes closed, she felt a shadow fall over her. Thorne stood above her, silent, his face hidden. For a moment she thought he would speak, but he didn't. He turned away and walked down the hallway toward his room, his boots echoing like distant thunder. Emma listened to the sound of the door closing, then the lock turning. She stared into the fire. What had she stepped into? And why did it feel like the beginning of something she didn't understand, but couldn't walk away from? Outside, the wind rose, cold and sharp. Inside, in the dark hallway, Thorne Maddox pressed his hands against his door and breathed hard, as if fighting something far more dangerous than a stranger sleeping by his fire. He whispered, so quietly Emma couldn't hear it, "Don't make me feel anything." But the battle had already begun. The storm rolled in before sunrise. The wind howled across the empty land like a wounded animal, rattling the windows and shaking dust from the rafters. Emma lay awake on the rug by the fire, listening to every creak and groan of the old house. But she wasn't listening to the storm. She was listening to him. Thorne Maddox had not slept. She could hear his footsteps in the hallway long before dawn, heavy, uneven, like a man pacing a cage. When he finally stepped out of his room, Emma sat up quickly. He paused when he saw her awake, as if surprised she hadn't run in the night. "Morning," she whispered. Thorne didn't answer. His eyes traveled over her face, her clothes, her tired posture. His own expression was unreadable. "You should eat," he said finally. "Storm's getting worse." He placed a plate of biscuits on the table, rough, uneven shapes that looked like they had been made in frustration rather than care. But the fact he'd made them at all made Emma's chest tighten. She sat at the table, and Thorne sat across from her. The silence between them was thick. Finally, Thorne spoke. "About what you said yesterday, your bargain." Emma's stomach knotted. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "You think offering yourself like that is a solution?" "I think it's survival," Emma whispered. "Survival doesn't need a promise like that." Her chest tightened. "Maybe not for you." His voice dropped lower. "You don't know what you're offering." Emma lifted her chin. "Then tell me." Thorne stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. He braced his hands on the table, his muscles tense. "You don't want to be my wife," he growled. "Not even once. And you sure don't want to promise it 3 times a day." Emma didn't look away. She refused to. "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be." Her voice softened. "But I'm not." Quote. Thorne stared at her, something breaking behind his eyes. For a moment he looked less like a hardened rancher and more like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. He exhaled. Then he turned away. "Get your bag," he muttered. "I'll take you to town." Emma froze. "You're sending me away?" Thorne didn't turn. "You need shelter, food, a future. You won't find that here." Her heart cracked at the final word. "You won't find that with me," he said. Emma stood slowly. "Is that what you really want?" He finally turned then, jaw tight, eyes storm dark. "It's what's safest." "For who?" she whispered. The question struck him like a blow. He didn't answer. Emma grabbed her bag and her coat. Her hands were trembling, but not from cold. She walked to the door. Thorne followed, silent, every step heavy. He opened the door into the freezing wind. Snow stung their faces as she stepped out. He untied his horse from the post. Then he stopped. Emma watched confusion ripple across his face. He was staring at the ground, at footprints, small ones, fresh ones, leading straight toward the barn. Thorne's voice dropped to a dangerously low whisper. "We're not alone." Before Emma could speak, he grabbed her arm and pulled her behind him, shielding her. He moved like a man who had done this before, too many times. Wind roared across the yard. The door of the barn creaked open. A shadow shifted inside. Thorne lifted his rifle. "Show yourself." A man stepped out, a tall stranger with a scar across his cheek and a rifle slung over his shoulder. His eyes were cold and calculating. Behind him came another man, and another, 3 in total. Emma felt her pulse pound in her throat. The scarred man smiled without warmth. "Well," he drawled, "looks like the stories were true. Thorne Maddox does have company up here." Thorne didn't move. "State your business." "We're here for what's ours," the man said. "Land, cattle, whatever's left of your pride." Thorne's grip tightened on his rifle. Emma whispered, "Thorne, what do they want?" "Trouble," he answered, and he was right. The scarred man stepped closer, boots crunching on frozen dirt. "She yours?" he asked, nodding toward Emma. "Pretty thing. A man could make a trade for a woman like that." Emma felt Thorne go still. Ice still. A dangerous still. "Say that again," Thorne said quietly. The man grinned wider. "I said." Thorne fired. The bullet hit the ground inches from the man's boot, blasting dirt into the air. Emma gasped. The stranger stumbled back. Thorne stepped forward, his voice shaking with fury. "She is not yours to look at." The scarred man's smile faded. "You just made a mistake, Maddox." Thorne didn't blink. "Wouldn't be my first." The wind howled louder. Snow spun around them. The 3 men backed away, but not in fear, only biding time. "We'll be back," the scarred man said. "And when we come, we're taking everything." They mounted their horses and rode off into the storm. The second they were gone, Emma sagged against the porch post, shaking. Thorne stood frozen, staring into the white horizon. "Who were they?" Emma whispered. Thorne didn't look at her. "The past," he said. He finally turned, his face hard, but his eyes burning. "You can't go to town. Not now. You stay here." Emma swallowed. "You said it wasn't safe with you." "It's safer than being out there with them." He stepped closer, close enough that his breath warmed her face despite the cold wind. "Emma," he said softly, "I don't want you here because of your promise." She looked up at him, heart pounding. "Then why?" she whispered. Thorne closed his eyes for a moment, fighting something inside him. Then he opened them. "Because losing you scares me more than losing this land." Her breath caught. He lifted a hand, hesitated, then touched her cheek, his fingers warm and rough. Emma leaned into his touch without fear. Thorne swallowed hard. "You stay," he whispered. "Not for the bargain you wrote, but because I need you here." Emma's eyes filled. "Thorne." He cupped her cheek with both hands, his voice breaking. "1 time a day," he said softly, "is already more than I deserve." She rose on her toes. He bent down. Their lips met, slow, trembling, full of every fear and every hope they tried to hide. The storm raged around them, but inside, for the first time, something fragile and warm began to grow. Something like mercy, something like home, something like love. The ranch was no longer silent. It was waking,